I thought Sunday lunch was just another family meal until my mother rested her hand on my shoulder, smiling sweet as sugar, and dropped a sentence that turned my blood cold. She announced that my room would become a nursery starting today. Everyone clapped like it was a celebration, but I knew the truth. They were not just taking a room, they were hijacking my life. I had to scrub my name off everything before they made me their scapegoat. My name is Maya Hart, and if my 32 years of life have taught me anything, it is that the most dangerous traps are not set in dark alleys, but on polished mahogany dining tables, right next to the fine china. I work as an operations manager for Northline Civic Solutions, a job that requires me to manage logistics, assess risks, and predict disasters before they happen. Yet, as I drove my sedan through the winding, tree-lined streets of suburban Charlotte, North Carolina, I failed to predict the disaster waiting for me behind the beige siding of my childhood home. It was Sunday, and in the Hart family, Sunday lunch was not a request. It was a summons. I was running 11 minutes late. I had spent the morning finalizing a crisis management report for a client in Raleigh, and the stress still hummed in my veins like a low-voltage wire. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the familiar knot tightened in my stomach. The house looked pristine, the lawn manicured to within an inch of its life, a perfect facade of the American dream. It was the house I had grown up in, but for the last 5 years, it had also been the house I legally half-owned. I parked my car, checked my makeup in the rearview mirror, and took a deep breath. I told myself to relax. It was just lunch, just roast beef, overly salted potatoes, and 2 hours of my mother asking why I was not married yet, while my father talked about his golf handicap. I was wrong. When I walked through the front door, the air inside felt different. It was charged, heavy with a frantic kind of joy that usually preceded bad decisions. I walked into the dining room, expecting to see place settings and steaming serving dishes. Instead, the table was covered in glossy paper. There were catalogs for cribs spread out like a fan. There were swatches of fabric in soft yellows and mint greens. There was a large foam mood board propped up against the centerpiece, featuring photos of nursery interiors and a printed color palette labeled New Beginnings. My mother, Diane, was standing by the window, beaming. My father, Frank, was sitting at the head of the table with his reading glasses perched on his nose, looking important. And there was my older sister, Tessa, sitting with a hand resting protectively over her stomach, looking like the Madonna of the suburbs. "Maya, finally," my mother said, though her tone lacked its usual bite about my tardiness. She rushed over and squeezed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Come in, we have news." I dropped my purse on a side chair. "I see that," I said, gesturing to the table. "Is congratulations in order?" Tessa smiled, a beatific expression that did not quite reach her eyes. "I'm 12 weeks along. It's a boy." "That's great, Tess, really," I said, and I meant it. Tessa had been trying for 2 years. "I'm happy for you." "We are all happy," Frank said, taking off his glasses. He gestured for me to sit. "But with a new baby comes new responsibilities, new arrangements." I sat down, my eyes scanning the table. "What kind of arrangements?" Diane poured me a glass of iced tea, her movements fluttery and excited. "Well, Tessa and her husband are currently in that 2-bedroom apartment downtown, and you know how unsafe the city is getting. We cannot have a baby in that environment. They need stability. They need family." I took a sip of tea, the ice clinking against the glass. "So they are moving to the suburbs?" "They are moving here," Diane said. She said it casually, as if she were commenting on the weather. I paused. "Here in this house?" "It makes the most sense," Frank stated, his voice carrying the finality of a gavel strike. "We have the space, or rather, we will have the space once we make a few adjustments." Diane leaned in, her smile turning sugary, the kind of smile that usually hid a razor blade. "We have been talking, and we realize that your old room is perfect for the nursery. It has the best light in the afternoon. Tessa already picked out a theme. It is going to be woodland creatures. My stomach dropped. My room? Well, the guest room, Tessa corrected softly, running a finger over a picture of a crib that probably cost $2,000. It is not really anyone's room right now, is it? It is the room where I stay when I visit, I said, my voice steady, though my pulse began to race. It is the room where I keep my winter clothes and my old files, and more importantly, it is a room in the house that I pay for. The air in the room shifted, the joy evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard tension. 5 years ago, Frank's business had taken a hit. They were at risk of losing the house. They needed to refinance to save it, but their credit was shot. They had begged, to co-sign. I had done more than co-sign. To get the best rate and satisfy the bank, I had been added to the deed as a co-owner. I paid 40% of the mortgage every single month. I paid for the roof repair last autumn. I paid for the new HVAC unit when the heat died in January. Maya, Frank said, his voice dropping an octave, a warning growl. Don't start. I am not starting anything, I said, looking from my father to my mother. I am just clarifying. You are moving Tessa and her husband in, and you are turning the room in the house I co-own into a nursery, without asking me? We are asking you now, Diane said, looking affronted. Though I hardly think we should have to ask permission to help your sister. Family helps family. Maya, I helped family when I signed a 30-year mortgage note so you wouldn't get foreclosed on, I said, trying to keep the emotion out of my voice. I help family every month when the auto draft hits my bank account. Tessa sighed, a loud, tragic sound. I told you she would react like this. Mom, she is always so territorial. I am not territorial, I snapped. I am liable. There is a difference. You are being dramatic, Frank said. You have your own apartment in the city. You have a good job. You don't live here. Why do you need that room? It sits empty 29 days out of the month. Because it is my legal residence on paper, Dad, and because I pay for it. Tessa looked up from the catalog, her eyes wide and innocent, but her words were calculated. Well, honestly, Maya, we already moved some of your boxes to the garage this morning. I needed to see if the crib would fit against the north wall, and the painter is coming on Tuesday, so we really didn't have a choice. I froze. You moved my things? Just the old junk, Diane said quickly. We left your filing cabinet. For now. You hired a painter? I looked at Tessa. You knew about this before today. Tessa shrugged, picking at a loose thread on the tablecloth. Mom and I were looking at colors last week. We wanted to surprise you. Surprise me? I laughed, a short, dry sound. By evicting me? Oh, stop using such harsh words, Diane said, waving a hand dismissively. Nobody is evicting you. You are welcome to sleep on the pull-out couch in the den whenever you visit, but the baby needs a proper room. You are a grown woman. Maya, you should be happy to sacrifice a little comfort for your nephew. It is not about comfort, I said, my hands trembling slightly beneath the table. It is about respect, and it is about the fact that this is my house, too. Frank leaned forward, placing his elbows on the table. He looked at me with the same expression he used when I was 10 years old and had broken a vase, disappointment mixed with authority. Listen to me. Maya, you are an adult. You don't need a childhood bedroom anymore. This house belongs to the family. It is a legacy, and right now, the future of this family is in Tessa's belly. We are doing this. The decision has been made. You can't just decide to reclaim property I pay for, I said, pushing back my chair. We are not reclaiming it, Diane said, her voice dropping to a whisper, her eyes glistening with practiced tears. We are repurposing it for love. Why must you always make everything a transaction? You have always been the sensible one. Maya, the one who understands duty. Don't spoil this moment for your sister. The sensible one, the reliable one, the one who pays the bills while everyone else plays house. I looked at their faces. Tessa, smug and protected. Diane, manipulative and sweet. Frank, arrogant and entitled. They didn't see me as a partner or a co-owner. They saw me as a resource, a wallet with a pulse. "I need a glass of water," I said abruptly. I stood up before I said something that would cause a scene I wasn't ready to win yet. "Get some ice," Diane called after me cheerfully, as if the conversation was over and resolved in her favor. "And bring the catalog for the strollers when you come back." I walked into the kitchen, my heels clicking sharply on the tile floor. My head was pounding. I walked to the sink and gripped the edge of the granite counter, staring out at the backyard. I took deep breaths, counting to 10. 1, 2, 3. I needed to be rational. I needed to think like a manager at Northline. Assess the situation. Identify the threat. I turned around to grab a glass from the cabinet, and that was when I saw it. Sitting on the kitchen island, amidst a pile of junk mail and coupons, was a large manila envelope. It had been opened. The return address was from a law firm I did not recognize, something generic like Henderson and Associates. Curiosity, cold and sharp, pricked at my neck. I glanced toward the dining room. I could hear them laughing. Tessa was talking about whether sage green was too trendy. I reached out and slid the papers out of the envelope. It was a legal draft. The title at the top read, "Quitclaim Deed. Draft for Review." I scanned the document, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a transfer of property ownership. It listed the property address, this house. It listed the grantors, Frank Hart, Diane Hart, and Maya Hart. It listed the grantees, Frank Hart, Diane Hart, and Tessa Hart. But it was the second page that made the room spin. There was a section for signatures. My name, Maya Hart, was typed out on the signature line, but someone had taken a red pen and drawn a thick, angry line through it and written a note in the margin in my mother's distinctive, loopy handwriting. The note read, "She will sign. Just prepare the final version. She does not need a payout." I stared at the red ink. It looked like a wound on the paper. They weren't just taking the room. They weren't just moving Tessa in. They were planning to remove me from the title completely. They wanted to transfer my equity, my investment, my legal ownership, directly to Tessa. And they were so confident in their control over me, so certain that the sensible one would just roll over and die for the sake of the family, that they had already instructed the lawyers to draw it up. She does not need a payout. I read the words again. 5 years of mortgage payments, thousands of dollars in repairs. My credit utilization ratio ruined for half a decade so they could live in comfort. And their plan was to erase me for $0 and 0 cents. "Maya?" Diane's voice floated from the dining room. "What is taking so long? We are deciding on the curtains." I shoved the papers back into the envelope. My hands were no longer shaking. A cold, mechanical calm washed over me. It was the feeling I got right before I fired someone for gross negligence. I grabbed a glass of water. I didn't bring the stroller catalog. I walked back into the dining room. They looked up at me. 3 faces waiting for my submission. "Found it," I said, my voice smooth, unrecognizable even to myself. "Found what?" Tessa asked. "My thirst," I said. I took a sip of water, staring at the spot on the wall where they planned to put the crib. "You're right, Mom. The light in that room is beautiful. It reveals everything." I sat down. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I smiled. The same way a predator smiles when it realizes the prey has nowhere left to run. They wanted my room? They wanted my house? They wanted my name on a piece of paper? Oh, I would give them a signature. But it wouldn't be the one they were expecting. The sensible one had just left the building. The operations manager had just clocked in. And the first item on my agenda was a total restructuring of the Hart family assets. Starting with my name, I drove away from my parents' house with the radio off. The silence in my car was heavy, pressing against my eardrums, but it was preferable to the noise of my own thoughts. I needed to get back to my apartment. I needed walls that I owned, a door that I controlled, and a space where the air did not smell like roast beef and betrayal. My apartment in the city was my sanctuary. It was the one place where I was not Maya the dutiful daughter or Maya the financial safety net. I was just Maya. or so I thought. I pulled into my designated parking spot at the complex at 2:15 in the afternoon. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles had turned white. I took a moment to breathe. Uncurling my fingers one by one, I told myself that the worst was over. I had seen their hand. I knew about the revised deed. Now I just needed to formulate a strategy. I took the elevator up to the 4th floor, my heels sinking into the hallway carpet. I reached into my purse for my keys, the metal cool and familiar against my fingertips. I walked to door number 402, inserted the key into the lock, and tried to turn it. It did not budge. I frowned, jiggling it slightly. Sometimes the tumbler stuck if the humidity was high. I tried again, applying a little more pressure. Nothing. It felt like I was trying to open the wrong door entirely. I stepped back and checked the number. 402. This was definitely my apartment. A cold prickle of unease danced down my spine. I looked closely at the hardware. The finish was shinier than I remembered. The brand stamped on the deadbolt was different. "Excuse me, Miss Hart?" I jumped and spun around. It was Gary, the weekend maintenance supervisor, holding a toolbox and looking apologetic. "Gary," I said, my voice rising a little in pitch. "My key isn't working. Did something happen to the lock?" "Oh, you didn't get the message?" Gary asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "Your folks were here about an hour ago. Your dad said the lock was sticking last time he visited, said it was a safety hazard. He had me swap it out for a heavy-duty one. He said they'd leave the new spare with the concierge and drop the main set on your counter." I stared at him. The hallway seemed to tilt slightly to the left. "My father changed my locks? Without asking me?" "He said it was a surprise," Gary said, looking suddenly uncomfortable. "He showed me his ID, and since he is listed as an emergency contact, I thought it was okay. I'm sorry, Miss Hart." "It is fine, Gary," I said, though it was absolutely not fine. "Can you let me in?" He used his master key to open the door. I thanked him mechanically and stepped inside, closing the door firmly behind me and throwing the deadbolt. The new, unauthorized deadbolt. The first thing that hit me was the smell. It was faint, lingering in the stagnant air conditioning, but it was unmistakable. White diamonds. My mother's perfume. It was a scent that used to mean comfort when I was a child, but now it smelled like invasion. It hung in the living room, a ghostly reminder that she had been here, walking on my floors, touching my things, while I was trapped at her dining table being told I was selfish. I walked through the apartment, checking for what else they had touched. My throw pillows were rearranged. The stack of mail I had left on the counter was sorted into neat piles. It was a power move disguised as a favor. They were marking their territory. They were reminding me that there was no lock strong enough to keep them out, because they had installed the locks inside my head years ago. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a rapid staccato of vibrations. I pulled it out. It was the family group chat. Diane had sent 4 photos in quick succession. The first photo was a wide shot of my room at the old house. The room I technically co-owned. The bed was stripped. My bookshelf, which held my collection of vintage paperbacks, had been pushed into the hallway. The second photo showed blue painter's tape on the hardwood floor, marking out a rectangle. The third photo was a close-up of the mood board I had seen at lunch, propped up against my wall. The text message underneath read, "Look how perfect the crib will fit here. We measured it out. There is even room for a rocking chair by the window. So cozy." I felt bile rise in my throat. They weren't waiting. They weren't negotiating. They were bulldozing. I dialed Tessa's number. She picked up on the second ring. "Did you see the pictures?" she asked, her voice light and airy. "Mom is so excited. She's already looking at curtains." "Tessa," I said, keeping my voice low, "why did Mom and Dad change the locks on my apartment?" There was a pause on the other end. "Oh, that? Dad mentioned the lock was sticky. He was just being helpful. Maya, you know how he worries about security, especially for a single woman living in the city." "I am 32 years old," I said. "I did not ask for a new lock, and I did not give them permission to enter my home." "You are making a big deal out of nothing," Tessa said, and I could hear the eye roll in her voice. They dropped off a casserole, too. It is in the fridge. Why do you always have to look for the negative? We are having a baby. Maya, can't you just be happy for me for 5 minutes without making it about your boundaries? This isn't about boundaries, Tessa. It is about control. They are dismantling my room and locking me out of my own apartment in the same afternoon. It is just a room, Maya, Tessa snapped, her voice losing its sweetness. You don't live there. I need the space. My baby needs the space. Why are you being so greedy? Greedy? I laughed, a harsh sound. I pay 40% of the mortgage on that house. Tessa, do you pay rent? I am focusing on my health, she said defensively. Stress is bad for the baby. I can't talk to you when you are like this. She hung up. I stood in the middle of my living room, the silence returning, but now it felt charged with electricity. Greedy. The word echoed in my mind. I looked at the new key sitting on my kitchen counter, gleaming and sharp. I needed to see the paperwork, not the draft I had found at lunch, but the original documents, the ones I had signed 5 years ago. I went to my home office, a small nook off the living room, and unlocked my filing cabinet. I prayed they hadn't found the key to this. At least, I pulled out the file labeled Northline St. Property. I sat cross-legged on the floor and spread the documents out. I hadn't looked at them in detail since I was 27. Back then, I had been so eager to help. My father had sat me down, looking weary and defeated, telling me that the business was struggling, that the bank was threatening to call the loan. He had said, "If you sign, we can refinance. The interest rate will drop. We will save the house. It is just a formality. Maya, you are building equity." I picked up the deed of trust. My eyes scanned the legalese. Joint tenants with rights of survivorship. That was standard. It meant we all owned it. Then I flipped to the promissory note. My finger traced the lines of text. I stopped at a paragraph I had skimmed over 5 years ago. It was a rider attached to the refinancing plan. It wasn't just a mortgage. It was a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, attached to the property, and right there, under the borrower responsibilities, was a clause regarding joint and several liability. I felt the blood drain from my face. My parents hadn't just refinanced the house to lower the rate. They had taken out a line of credit against the equity that I was helping to build, and because I was a co-borrower, I was 100% liable for that debt if they defaulted. I checked the current balance statement, which I had to log into the bank portal to find. I usually just transferred my share to my dad's account and let him pay the bill. I had trusted him. The balance on the HELOC was nearly maxed out, $65,000. Where had that money gone? The roof repair cost $12,000. The HVAC was $8,000. That left $45,000 unaccounted for. I thought about Tessa's new car. I thought about the cruise my parents took last year to celebrate their anniversary. I thought about the updates to the kitchen that I hadn't been consulted on. They were funding their lifestyle with my credit, and now they wanted me off the deed? If I signed that quitclaim deed they had drafted, I would lose my ownership stake in the house. I would give up my 40%. But, and this was the terrifying part, unless the bank also agreed to release me from the mortgage and the HELOC, I would still be liable for the debt. They wanted to keep me as the debtor but remove me as the owner. My computer dinged. A new email had arrived. I crawled over to my desk and woke the screen. The subject line read, "Appointment Confirmation, Tuesday, 10:00 a.m." It was from a secure document signing service called Secure Sign Escrow. Dear Ms. Hart, this email is to confirm your appointment for the notary signing regarding the property transfer for 124 Northline Street. As per the request of Mr. Frank Hart, we have expedited the mobile notary service to your office address at Northline Civic Solutions. Please have 2 forms of ID ready. I stared at the screen. They were coming to my work. They were sending a notary to my place of employment, in front of my colleagues and my boss, to pressure me into signing away my rights. They knew I hated scenes. They knew I prided myself on professionalism. They were banking on the fact that I would sign anything just to get the notary out of my office and avoid embarrassment. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. I leaned back in my chair, my head spinning. Memories flashed through my mind, disjointed but connected by a single thread of control. I remembered being 22, freshly graduated, and my father calling the hiring manager at a company I applied to, just to put in a good word, which resulted in me losing the opportunity because I looked like a child who couldn't fight her own battles. I remembered the times Diane would come over to my apartment to clean, which really meant rearranging my furniture because my feng shui was wrong, and casually throwing away clothes she didn't like. I had always called it love. I had called it being close-knit. I had called it caring. But looking at the $65,000 debt and the appointment confirmation for a notary I never requested, I finally called it what it was. It was a trap. They didn't want a nursery. The nursery was just the emotional hook, the Trojan horse. They needed to secure the house for Tessa because they knew their finances were a sinking ship, and they wanted to offload the asset to her before everything crashed. And they needed me to stay on the hook for the debt to keep the ship afloat a little longer. My phone buzzed again, another text from Diane. "Don't be mad about the lock. Sweetie, Dad just wants you safe. We love you. See you next Sunday? We can talk about the color for the nursery walls." I looked at the message. I looked at the email from the escrow company. I didn't reply. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't cry. I picked up a pen and a fresh notepad. I was done arguing. Arguing implied that I cared about their feelings. Arguing implied that there was a middle ground to be found. There was no middle ground here. There was only the predator and the prey, and I was done being the meal. I wrote down the date, Sunday, October 12th. I wrote down the first item on my list, secure copy of unauthorized credit pull. I wrote down the second item, contact land registry for permit applications. I wrote down the third item, change locks, again. I was going to clear my name. I was going to get off that deed, and I was going to get off that loan. And I was going to do it with the cold, hard precision of the operations manager they were so proud of. If they wanted to treat me like a bank, they were about to deal with the audit department. The morning after the lock debacle, I stopped by an electronics store before heading to the office. I did not buy a new laptop or a television. I bought 3 high-definition security cameras and a smart doorbell. The cashier made small talk about home security being a smart investment these days, assuming I was worried about burglars or porch pirates. I smiled tightly and paid $200 for the equipment. I could not tell him that the burglars I was worried about had keys to my house and had changed my diapers. I spent my lunch break installing them. It was perfectly legal. I owned the apartment condo, and I had every right to monitor the interior space. I placed the doorbell camera first, syncing it to my phone. Then I went inside. I hid one small camera on top of the kitchen cabinets, angled toward the front door. I placed the second one, the most important one, on the bookshelf in my home office. Nestled between a copy of Great Expectations and a potted succulent, it pointed directly at my filing cabinet. I felt a wave of nausea as I adjusted the lens. There is something deeply unnatural about setting a trap for your own mother. It felt dirty. It felt paranoid. For a moment, I almost took them down, thinking I was overreacting. Maybe Tessa was right. Maybe I was just being territorial. But then I remembered the red line through my name on the deed draft. I left the cameras running. It took less than 48 hours. On Tuesday afternoon, I was in a budget meeting at Northline Civic Solutions. My phone was face up on the conference table, silent as visible. At 2:15 in the afternoon, the screen lit up with a notification. Motion detected. Living room. My heart hammered against my ribs. I slid the phone into my lap, keeping my face neutral as my boss discussed quarterly projections. I opened the app and watched the live feed. The front door opened. My mother walked in. She was not sneaking. She did not look over her shoulder. She walked into my apartment with the casual confidence of a woman who believed she owned the world, or at least my corner of it. She was wearing her beige trench coat and carrying a large tote bag. She set her keys, the new keys, on the counter and walked straight to the kitchen. She opened my refrigerator, inspected the contents, and shook her head, likely judging my lack of fresh produce. Then she moved toward the home office. I switched camera views. The feed from the bookshelf was crisp and clear. Diane walked into the frame. She went straight to the filing cabinet. I had locked it, of course, but my mother knew me. She knew where I hid things because she was the one who taught me how to hide them. She lifted the ceramic pot of the peace lily on the windowsill and retrieved the small silver key I kept taped to the bottom. I watched, frozen in horror. As she unlocked the cabinet, she did not hesitate. She pulled out the file labeled Northline St. Property. She took out her phone and began snapping pictures of every page. The promissory note, the original deed, the amortization schedule. After she finished photographing the documents, she rummaged deeper. She found a separate envelope in the back, my personal bank statements from the last 3 years. She hesitated, then shoved that envelope into her tote bag. She locked the cabinet, replaced the key under the plant, and smoothed her hair in the reflection of the window. It was the violation that broke me. It was not just the theft. It was the intimacy of it. She was stripping me of my privacy as easily as she would peel an orange. I excused myself from the meeting, my legs feeling like lead. I walked out to the corridor and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful. "Hi, honey. I was just thinking about you." I looked at the screen, on the video feed. She was currently walking out of my front door, locking it behind her. "Where are you, Mom?" I asked. "Me? Oh, I am just at the grocery store." She lied. The lie came out so smooth, so practiced. "Buying ingredients for dinner. Dad wants meatloaf." "Stop lying," I said. My voice was shaking, not with fear, but with a rage so cold it burned. "I am watching you on camera. Mom, you are leaving my apartment right now." There was a silence on the other line. A long, heavy silence. "You put cameras in your apartment?" she asked finally. Her tone was not apologetic. It was offended. "That is very invasive, Maya." "You just broke into my filing cabinet and stole my bank statements," I snapped. "You took photos of the mortgage documents. Put them back. Turn around and put them back right now." "I did no such thing as break in," she said, her voice rising to that pitch she used when she wanted to play the victim. "I was worried about you. You have been so stressed lately, so forgetful. I just wanted to make sure your paperwork was organized. You know you are bad at keeping track of things." "I am an operations manager," I said through gritted teeth. "I organize things for a living. You are stealing information because you know I found out about the debt." "Maya, you are being hysterical," she said. "I took a few papers to help your father with the accountant. We are trying to help you get your name off the loan so you can be free. Why do you always twist our kindness into something ugly?" Then, I heard a shuffle on the line. My father had evidently been waiting in the car. "Maya," Frank's voice came on, deep and warning. "That is enough." "Dad, she broke into my home." "She used a key," Frank corrected. "And she is your mother. We are trying to facilitate a transfer that benefits everyone. If you continue to act like this, making accusations, recording us like we are criminals, well, it reflects poorly on you." "Are you threatening me?" "I am telling you that family does not sue family," Frank said. "We handle things at the dinner table, not in court, not with police. You need to calm down, delete those videos, and come over on Sunday so we can sign the papers properly. If you make this difficult, Maya, things will get messy. And you know you don't have the stomach for messy." He hung up. I stood in the office corridor, staring at my phone. They were terrified. I realized it then. The gaslighting, the bullying, the theft. It was all panic. They knew I held the cards. They knew that if I went to the bank with proof of their mismanagement, or if I forced a sale of the house, their house of cards would collapse. They needed my signature because, without it, they were insolvent. I did not go back to the meeting. I went to the stairwell and called Kira. Kira had been my best friend since college. She worked as a senior paralegal at a firm downtown. She knew where the bodies were buried because she usually helped draft the paperwork to bury them. "Tell me you are free for a crisis," I said when she answered. For you? Always, Kira said. What did they do now? I told her everything. The nursery, the locks, the HELOC, the video of Diane stealing my records. Holy cow, Kira whispered. Maya, you need a lawyer, not me, a real estate litigator, a shark. I don't want to sue them, Kira. I just want out. You are past wanting out, she said sharply. They are building a case against you. If Diane took your bank statements, they are probably looking for evidence to claim you are financially unstable so they can petition for power of attorney or force a quitclaim, or they are trying to prove you never contributed to the mortgage payments. You need to stop this bleeding now. She gave me a name, Arthur Vance. I called Vance's office immediately. Kira's name opened the door, and I got an emergency consultation at 5 p.m. Arthur Vance was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. His office smelled of old books and expensive coffee. He listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. I showed him the revised deed draft I had photographed on Sunday. I showed him the video of my mother raiding my files. He leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. You have a significant problem, Ms. Hart, he said. His voice was gravelly and devoid of emotion. Your parents are not just trying to pressure you, they are engaged in active fraud preparation. They are gathering materials to forge a narrative that you are voluntarily relinquishing your asset. I just want my name off the loan, I said. I don't care about the equity anymore. I just want to be safe from their debt. We can try to negotiate a partition action, Vance said. Force a sale, but that takes time. Right now, we need to stop them from executing any documents in your name. We need to file a notice with the county recorder immediately to flag any changes to the deed. He turned to his computer and began typing rapidly. I am going to pull the current status of the property on the county portal, just to see if they have filed anything pending. I sat there, wringing my hands. I felt small. I felt like a child telling on her parents, even though I was the one being victimized. Vance frowned. The clicking of his keyboard stopped. Ms. Hart, he said slowly, you said you did not agree to the renovation of the room, the nursery. No, I said. I explicitly told them I did not consent. Vance turned the monitor toward me. That is unfortunate, because according to the city's building permit database, an application was filed yesterday for a residential interior remodel at 124 North Line Street, specifically for structural changes to a second-floor bedroom. I squinted at the screen. They must have filed it under Dad's name. No, Vance said. He pointed to the applicant line. It was not filed by Frank Hart. I looked closer. The room seemed to drop in temperature. The applicant's name was typed clearly. Maya Hart. They used your name, Vance said, his eyes hard. They forged your electronic signature to get the permit approved because as the primary co-owner listed first on the deed. The city requires your sign-off, Ms. Hart. This is no longer a family dispute. This is identity theft. I stared at my name on the screen. It looked so official, so real, and yet it was a lie. What does this mean? I whispered. It means, Vance said, reaching for his phone, that they are not waiting for you to surrender. They have already started being you. The fluorescent lights of the Human Resources Office at Northline Civic Solutions had never felt so interrogative. I sat across from Linda, our HR director, a woman who had known me for 4 years and who had always praised my efficiency. Today, however, she looked at me with a mixture of pity and professional concern that made my skin crawl. Maya, Linda said, sliding a printed email across the desk. You know we generally do not entertain anonymous tips, but this one, well, given the nature of your role in operations and financial logistics, we have to look into it, just to clear the air. I looked down at the paper. The sender's address was a burner account, something generic like Concerned Citizen 55. But the language was terrifyingly familiar. It used phrases my mother often used, like flying off the handle and losing her moral compass. To Northline Management, I am writing out of concern for Maya Hart. She has been exhibiting signs of severe mental instability lately due to a personal financial crisis. There are rumors she is leveraging family assets without consent to cover gambling debts. As she handles company budgets, you might want to audit her accounts. Gambling debts, mental instability. I felt the blood drain from my face. I did not gamble. I did not have debts, other than the mortgage my parents were drowning me in. But the phrasing, leveraging family assets without consent, was a direct projection of exactly what they were doing to me. They were flipping the script. If I accused them of financial abuse later, they could point to this investigation and say I was the one with the problem. "Linda," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, "this is a malicious fabrication. I am currently in a legal dispute regarding a property title where I am the victim of identity theft. The perpetrators are trying to discredit me." Linda blinked. "Identity theft? That is serious." "It is," I replied, "and I can provide a letter from my attorney, Arthur Vance, confirming that I am currently securing my assets against fraudulent activity. My financial record is spotless. This email is a harassment tactic." I walked out of that office with my job secure, but my reputation bruised. They had crossed a line I did not think existed. They were not just coming for my room. They were coming for my livelihood. If I lost my job, I would not be able to pay the mortgage. If I could not pay the mortgage, the house would face foreclosure. And if the house faced foreclosure, but they did not think that far ahead. Or perhaps they thought that if I lost my income, I would be forced to sign the house over to them just to escape the payments. It was a scorched earth policy, and I was the ground they were burning. When I got back to my desk, I made the mistake of checking social media. I usually kept my profile private, but my Aunt Karen, my mother's sister, had a public profile. There, posted 3 hours ago, was a status update. "Asking for prayers for my sister Diane today. It is heartbreaking when children you raised with so much love turn out to be so selfish. Imagine denying a shelter to an unborn baby just because you want to keep a room for storage. Some people value material things over family. So sad." Below it, a dozen comments from the church choir members and neighbors. "Praying for you. Diane, that is awful. Is it the oldest one? The devil works hard, but a mother's love is stronger." I felt a physical blow to my chest. They were rewriting reality. To the world. I was the bitter, childless spinster hoarding a bedroom I did not use, while poor, pregnant Tessa was being forced onto the street. They conveniently left out the $65,000 of debt, the forged permits, and the stolen bank statements. My phone rang. It was Tessa. I debated ignoring it, but I needed to know how far they were willing to go. I pressed record on my other device and answered. "Maya?" Tessa's voice was thick, wet with tears. "Are you happy now?" "Hello to you too, Tessa," I said coldly. "Mom is a wreck," she sobbed. "She is at Bible study right now, crying in the bathroom because she is so ashamed of you. People are asking her why her daughter is suing the family." "I am not suing anyone yet. Tessa, I am protecting myself." "You are stressing me out," Tessa shrieked, her voice cracking. "I went to the doctor today, and my blood pressure is up. Do you know what that does to the baby? Do you want me to lose this child? Is that what you want? You are so jealous that I have a husband and a family that you want to destroy it." The accusation hit a nerve, exactly as she intended. For years, they had made subtle digs about my single status. Maya is married to her career. Maya is too intimidating for men. Now, they were weaponizing it. "Tessa," I said, keeping my voice flat, "I do not care about your husband. I care about the fact that yesterday, a contractor from Miller Renovations left a voicemail on my work phone regarding a quote for drywall removal at the Northline house. He said he spoke to Maya on the phone on Monday." Tessa went silent. The sobbing stopped instantly. "I was at work on Monday," I continued. "I did not call a contractor who pretended to be me. Tessa, was it you or was it Mom?" "We just needed a quote," she snapped, the victim act vanishing. "You were being difficult, so I handled it. It is my nursery." It is fraud, I said. Impersonating an owner to solicit work on a property is fraud. Tell Mom to stop posting lies on Facebook, and tell Aunt Karen that if she does not take that post down, my lawyer will add her to the defamation suit. I hung up before she could start crying again. My hands were shaking, but this time, it was not from fear. It was from adrenaline. I called Arthur Vance immediately. They are escalating, I told him, recounting the HR email and the contractor call. They are trying to get me fired, Arthur, and they are using my name to contract work. We need to stop waiting, Arthur said, his voice grim. I am sending a formal demand letter via courier today. We are demanding the immediate return of your keys. We are demanding they cease all use of your name. And we are notifying them that all future communication must go through my office. No more texts. No more guilt trips. Do it, I said. 3 hours later, my father called. I did not answer. He called again, and again. Finally, he left a voicemail. I listened to it in the safety of my locked apartment. Maya, Frank's voice was shaking with rage. A courier? You sent a courier to our door like we are strangers? You are banning us from contacting you? We are your parents, you ungrateful little brat. You dare to treat us like criminals? We put a roof over your head for 18 years. If you do not call me back in 5 minutes, I am coming down there. I saved the voicemail. I forwarded it to Arthur. Do not engage, Arthur texted back. Let them dig the hole. I spent the evening in silence, staring at the timeline I had created on my wall. The nursery announcement on Sunday, the lock change on Monday, the theft of documents on Tuesday, the character assassination on Wednesday. It was a blitzkrieg. Then, at 9 o'clock at night, an email arrived from Arthur. Subject: Urgent. Document discovery. Maya. My paralegal was digging through the uploaded documents attached to the building permit application on the city portal. We found a consent to alter property form dated last Sunday. See attached. I opened the attachment. It was a PDF of a standard city form. At the bottom of the page, there were 3 signatures: Frank Hart, Diane Hart, and there, in blue ink, was a signature that read, Maya Hart. I stared at it. It was my name. It had the same slant as my handwriting. It had the same loop on the M and the sharp cross on the T. To an outsider, it looked perfect. But I knew it was fake. I knew it because on Sunday, when this was allegedly signed, I was at their house refusing to sign anything. And then I saw the tiny tremor in the ink on the tail of the Y. It was a hesitation mark, the kind you make when you are tracing something against a window or using a light box. My mother had not just practiced my signature. She had traced it from an old birthday card or a check I had written them. I zoomed in on the date next to the signature. It was written in my father's blocky handwriting. They were in this together. My father held the paper, my mother held the pen, and Tessa probably held the flashlight. They had forged my consent to destroy the room I owned. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. That was the moment the last thread of family snapped. They weren't misguided. They weren't just desperate. They were thieves. I picked up my phone and texted Arthur back. It is a forgery. I can prove it. Arthur's reply came instantly. Then we have them. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we go to war. I looked at the screen, at the fake signature that was supposed to bind me to their will. Sleep tight, Mom, I whispered to the empty room. Because you just signed your own eviction notice. Sitting in the office of Eleanor Vance, a forensic document examiner recommended by my attorney, I felt the last remnants of my childhood dissolving into the gray carpet. The room was sterile, lit by high-intensity lamps used to analyze ink strokes and pressure points. It was a place for science, not sentiment, and that was exactly what I needed, because my heart was still trying to make excuses for the people who shared my DNA. Arthur Vance sat beside me, his presence a silent wall of granite. Eleanor placed a magnified image of the consent to alter property form on the screen. You see this? She asked, pointing to the tail of the signature that read, Maya Hart. When a person signs their own name, it is a ballistic movement. It is muscle memory. It happens in a fraction of a second. But this, she tapped the screen. See the microscopic hesitation marks here, on the loop of the M, and the inconsistent ink density on the cross of the T? This was drawn, not signed. It is a simulation. We know it is a forgery, I said, my voice sounding hollow. I just need to know if it will hold up in court. It will, Arthur interjected. But we need more than just the how. We need the when and the where. We need to prove impossibility. He pointed to the date next to the forged signature. September 22nd. I stared at the date. September 22nd. That was 3 weeks before the Sunday lunch. That was before they even announced the pregnancy to the extended family. They had been planning this renovation and executing the legal permissions for it, while I was still coming over for dinner and completely unaware. Check your calendar, Arthur instructed. Where were you on September 22nd? I pulled out my phone and scrolled back. My breath hitched. I was in Raleigh, I said. I was at the annual State Operations Conference. I checked into the hotel on the 21st and didn't check out until the 24th. I opened my expense report app. There it was, in black and white pixels. A hotel folio from the Marriott in Raleigh. A time-stamped Uber receipt from the convention center at 8 in the morning on the 22nd. A credit card charge for a client dinner at 7 in the evening. I was 200 miles away, I whispered. I couldn't have signed a physical document in Charlotte. Excellent, Arthur said, noting it down. We have physical impossibility. Now, we look at the mechanism. I went back to the video footage from my apartment. The recording of my mother raiding my filing cabinet. I had watched it a dozen times, fueled by anger. But this time I watched it with the cold, dissecting eye of an investigator. I zoomed in. Diane didn't just grab random papers. She flipped past my recent utility bills. She ignored my medical records. Her hand hovered, then stopped at a specific folder. Tax returns, 2018 to 2020. She pulled out the 2019 return. She opened it to the signature page. She held it up, snapped a photo with her phone, and then, this was the detail I had missed before, she placed a piece of tracing paper over it for a brief second, as if checking the size, before shoving it back. She wasn't just looking for financial data. She was shopping for a template. She needed an older signature, one from before I started abbreviating my middle initial, to match the style on the original house deed. She hunted for it, I said, the realization settling in my stomach like a stone. She came into my home to steal my identity so she could give my room to my sister. I left the lawyer's office feeling stripped raw. I drove back to my apartment, the city lights blurring in my vision. When I pulled up to my building, I saw a familiar car idling in the visitor spot, a silver sedan. Tessa. She was leaning against the hood, arms crossed over her small baby bump. She looked tired, her face blotchy, stripped of the smugness she had worn at Sunday lunch. I considered driving past. I considered calling the police, but something in me needed to hear it. I needed to look her in the eye. I parked and got out, standing by my door. I didn't walk toward her. You changed the locks again, she called out, her voice raspy. I tried to use the key Dad gave me to leave you a note. That key is stolen property, I said. What do you want, Tessa? She walked over, stopping a safe distance away. I want you to stop this insanity. Mom is a mess. Dad is talking about mortgaging his life insurance. Do you have any idea what you're doing to us? I am stopping you from stealing my house, I said. Go home. It is not stealing, she cried out, stomping her foot like a child. We were going to tell you. We just needed to get the permit approved early because the contractor had a slot open in October. If we waited for you to agree, we would have lost the slot. So you committed a felony because you didn't want to wait for a contractor? We didn't commit a felony. Tessa stepped closer, her eyes desperate. Look, Maya, just sign the new papers. Dad has them. If you sign the quitclaim and the retroactive consent form now, it validates the date. It fixes everything. The lawyer said if you ratify it, the signature on the permit doesn't matter because you accepted it. The world seemed to stop spinning for a second. "Say that again," I said softly. "Just sign the papers," she pleaded. "Make it legal. If you sign now, we can say the first one was just a placeholder you authorized verbally. We can fix this. Please. For the baby." And there it was. The smoking gun. They weren't asking for my room anymore. They weren't asking for peace. They were asking me to become an accessory to their crime. They had forged the signature weeks ago. And now that I had caught them, the only way to keep themselves out of jail was to get me to sign a document that said, "Yes, I allowed this." They needed my signature to bury the body they had already killed. "You don't want my forgiveness," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and grief. "You want my complicity." "I just want a nursery," Tessa screamed. "Why do you have to be so difficult? You have always been the difficult one." "No," I corrected her. "I have always been the sensible one. Isn't that what Mom says? Maya is the sensible one. Maya understands." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and I saw the dynamic that had ruled my entire life. Sensible wasn't a compliment. Tessa, it was a job description. It meant I was the designated shock absorber. It meant I was the one who was expected to absorb the debt, the stress, and the inconvenience, so that you and Mom and Dad could live in your fantasy world where actions didn't have consequences. "Being sensible is just a fancy word for being a doormat," I said, "and I am done lying down." "If you don't fix this," Tessa hissed, her face twisting into something ugly, "Dad says he will let the bank take the house. He will stop paying, and your credit will be ruined along with ours. He will drag you down with us." "Let him try," I said. I turned my back on her and walked into my building. I didn't look back when she started screaming my name. I went upstairs and called Kira. "Don't sign anything," Kira said immediately when I told her about the conversation. "Tessa is right about one thing. If you sign a ratification document, you legally absolve them of the forgery. You become a co-conspirator. They are trying to trick you into pardoning them." "I know," I said. "I'm not signing. But Kira, Tessa said Dad would stop paying the mortgage just to spite me, to ruin my credit." "That is the nuclear option," Kira said. "But given what I've seen, I wouldn't put it past him." My computer pinged. It was an email from Arthur Vance. The subject line was simply, "Urgent. Review of loan terms." I opened it. "Maya, I have finished a deep dive review of the secondary loan, the HELOC, your father took out 5 years ago. We found a clause buried in the addendum that is highly irregular. It is a dispute acceleration and priority liability clause. It states that in the event of a legal dispute between borrowers that endangers the collateral, the house, or if the primary borrower, your father, declares insolvency, the bank has the right to freeze the assets of the secondary co-borrower, you, immediately to satisfy the debt, bypassing the primary borrower's protected retirement accounts. I read the paragraph 3 times. My father hadn't just used me to get a better interest rate. He had structured the loan so that if things went south, I was the human shield. He had protected his pension and his retirement, and he had served me up as the collateral. If they stopped paying, the bank wouldn't just take the house. They would come for my savings, my car, my wages. My parents hadn't just built a nursery in my room. They had built a trapdoor under my feet, rigged to drop me into bankruptcy the moment I tried to stand up for myself. I sat in the dark of my living room, the glow of the monitor illuminating the tears I refused to shed. The sadness was gone now. The grief for the family I thought I had was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard clarity of a balance sheet. They treated me like a financial instrument? Fine, I would act like one. Instruments don't have feelings. They don't have loyalty. They have terms and conditions. And my terms had just changed. I picked up the phone and dialed Arthur. "File the police report," I said, "and initiate the partition lawsuit. I don't just want my name off the deed. Arthur, I want to force the sale of the house. I want my equity out. And I want that loan paid off before they can spend another dime." "Are you sure?" Arthur asked. "Once we pull this trigger, there is no going back. It will destroy them financially." "They were ready to destroy me to paint a wall pink," I said. Pull the trigger. If the previous days were defined by shock and betrayal, Wednesday marked the beginning of the counteroffensive. I woke up at 5 in the morning, not from a nightmare, but with a clarity that felt almost surgical. My parents relied on the assumption that I was still their daughter, emotional, pliable, and desperate for their approval. They expected me to cry, to beg, or to scream. They were not prepared for me to act like the operations manager of a mid-sized corporation facing a hostile takeover. I made a pot of coffee, black, and sat down at my desk. The first step was defense. I logged into the websites of the 3 major credit bureaus. One by one, I placed a security freeze on my Social Security number. I set up fraud alerts that would trigger a phone call to my personal cell for any credit inquiry, no matter how small. Then, I went deeper. I contacted check systems to freeze my banking history, ensuring no one could open a checking account in my name. I changed every password I owned, from my email to my Netflix account, using a random generator that created strings of nonsense characters. I enabled 2-factor authentication on everything. By 7 in the morning, I had effectively built a digital fortress around my identity. If my father tried to leverage my credit score to buy a pack of gum, I would know about it before the transaction cleared. At 8:30, I was in Arthur Vance's office again. We did not exchange pleasantries. "Did you send the letter to the escrow company?" I asked. Arthur nodded, sliding a copy across the desk. "It went out via urgent courier and email at 8 o'clock. We issued a formal notice of dispute to secure sign escrow. We informed them that the scheduled notary appointment was unauthorized and that any transfer documents regarding the Northline Street property are currently subject to a fraud investigation." "Will they stop it?" "They will freeze it immediately," Arthur said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "Escrow officers are terrified of liability. The moment they smell a lawsuit, they lock the file. Your parents will get a call from them by noon telling them the refinancing is on hold indefinitely." "Good," I said. "Now, let's talk about the permit." "The consent to alter property form," Arthur said. "What about it?" "I want to know who clicked submit," I said. "I know it wasn't me. I know it was them. But I need to prove it wasn't just a glitch or a mistake. I need to prove intent." "We can file a records request with the city," Arthur said. "Since it is a government portal, all submissions are public record. However, getting the metadata, the IP address, might take a subpoena." "Not necessarily," I corrected him. "The city uses a third-party vendor for their permitting portal. I know this because Northline Civic Solutions bid on a similar contract last year. The vendor includes a digital audit trail on the confirmation receipt that is automatically emailed to the applicant." I pulled up the fake email address my parents had used to register the account. They had been lazy. They used mayaheart@house@gmail.com. It was not my email. "If we can subpoena the internet service provider for that IP address," I said, pointing to the audit trail on the bottom of the printed form Arthur had found, "we can match it to a physical location." Arthur looked at me, impressed. "You want to trace the call coming from inside the house?" "I want to pin them to the keyboard," I replied. I left the legal maneuvering to Arthur and went home to handle the human element. There was one loose end that had been bothering me. How my mother knew exactly when I was in meetings or when I was out of town. She had timed her entry into my apartment too perfectly. I went to the lobby of my building. Victor, the concierge who had been working the front desk for 6 years, smiled when he saw me, but his smile faltered when he saw my expression. "Miss Hart," he said, "everything okay with the new lock?" "The lock is fine. Victor," I said, leaning against the high marble counter. "But I have a question. In the last month, has anyone asked you about my schedule?" Victor shifted his weight, looking down at his logbook. "Well, your father stops by occasionally, to drop off packages or food." "I know he drops things off," I said, "but did he ask questions?" Victor sighed, looking guilty. "He came by about 3 weeks ago. He was very friendly, gave me a cigar, said he wanted to surprise you with a family trip, but he needed to know when you were traveling for work so he didn't double book. He asked if I knew when you were going to that conference in Raleigh. My blood ran cold. And you told him? He is your dad, Miss Hart, Victor said, defensiveness creeping into his voice. He showed me his ID. He said you were so busy you probably forgot to tell him the dates. I just checked the resident log for when you put in your away notice for the cat sitter. I thought I was helping. Victor, I said, my voice level. Because you helped him. My identity was stolen. Victor's face went pale. What? I am not going to report you to the building management yet, I said. But I need you to write down exactly what he asked, the date he came in, and the fact that you provided him with my travel dates. I need a signed statement. I can't lose this job, Victor stammered. Then write the statement, I said. If you help me, I leave you out of the lawsuit. If you don't, you are an accessory. 10 minutes later, I had a handwritten note from Victor confirming that Frank Hart had fished for the specific dates of my Raleigh trip, the exact dates he later used to forge my signature on the permit, thinking I would have no alibi because I was away. I went back upstairs and cleared my dining table. It was time to build the timeline. I used a roll of butcher paper I kept for brainstorming sessions. I taped it to the wall. I took a black marker and drew a long, straight line. September 15th. Frank pumps Victor for my travel dates. September 21st. I check into the Marriott in Raleigh. September 22nd. The consent to alter property is submitted to the city portal from an IP address that I was 80% sure belonged to my parents' router. October 5th. The Sunday lunch, the ambush. October 6th. The unauthorized lock change. October 7th. Diane enters my apartment and steals financial records. October 8th. The anonymous HR email and the contractor call. It was a beautiful, terrible picture of premeditation. They hadn't just reacted to a pregnancy. They had been planning this heist for a month. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Frank. We received a very rude letter from your lawyer today. The escrow company has suspended the refinancing. Do you realize what you have done? You have put the family in danger. We need to talk. Sunday, lunch. Don't be a coward. I stared at the screen. The old Maya would have typed back a paragraph of defense. The old Maya would have called and screamed. The new Maya put the phone down and made a sandwich. I let them stew for 4 hours. I let them wonder if I was scared, if I was broken, or if I was just gone. At 6 p.m, I replied, You are right. This has gone too far. I am tired of fighting. I will come on Sunday. The response was immediate. Good. We knew you would come to your senses. Bring the lawyer's withdrawal letter. We can fix this. I didn't reply to that. I just smiled. They thought I was coming to surrender. They thought tired of fighting meant I was ready to sign. They didn't understand that I was tired of fighting defensively. I was coming to end the war. I spent the rest of the week in a strange, calm bubble. I went to work. I smiled at my colleagues. I answered emails. But every evening, I was assembling my arsenal. I met with Eleanor Vance, the handwriting expert, one more time. She handed me a bound report, thick and heavy. It is conclusive, she said. The pressure patterns on the forged consent form match the writing samples from your mother, not you, and the ink analysis from the original deed, if we can get a court order to test it, will likely show it was signed with a different pen than the other parties, suggesting it was added later. This is perfect, I said. Are you going to use this in court? Eleanor asked. Eventually, I said. But first, I am going to give them a preview. I went to a print shop on Saturday morning. I printed 3 copies of a 20-page document I had compiled. I bound them in clear plastic covers. It looked like a quarterly business review, the kind I presented to the board of directors. The title page read, Asset Review and Liability Analysis, The Hart Family Trust. It sounded boring. It sounded professional. Inside, however, it was a step-by-step documentation of their crimes. I included the stills from my security camera showing Diane stealing the tax returns. I included the statement from Victor. I included the IP address log. I included the side-by-side comparison of my real signature versus the forgery. and I included the clause from the HELOC agreement, the one that made me the sacrificial lamb. I placed the 3 booklets in my briefcase. I checked my outfit for Sunday. I didn't wear the floral dresses my mother liked. I chose a charcoal gray suit, tailored and sharp. I wore the heels that made me 2 inches taller. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I wasn't going to lunch as a daughter. I wasn't going as a sister. I was going as a creditor coming to collect. Saturday night, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the Charlotte skyline. The air was crisp, hinting at winter. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a notification from the fraud alert system I had set up. Alert. Credit inquiry blocked. Attempted by Miller Renovations. They were trying to finance the renovation in my name again, probably assuming I would lift the freeze by Sunday. I took a sip of wine. Denied, I whispered to the wind. The pieces were all on the board. The timeline was set. The evidence was undeniable. And the best part was, they had invited me, they had set the table, cooked the roast, and gathered the audience. All I had to do was show up and serve the main course. The driveway of my childhood home looked exactly the same as it had the previous Sunday, but the woman walking up the concrete path was entirely different. Last week, I had been a confused daughter, blindsided by a betrayal I could not comprehend. Today, I was a litigator in a charcoal suit, carrying a briefcase that contained the dismantling of my parents' reputation. I arrived at exactly 12 o'clock. I did not knock. I still had my key, the old key that worked on the front door. Even if they had changed the lock on my apartment, I wanted to remind them that access was a 2-way street. The first thing that hit me was the smell. It wasn't roast beef this time. It was the sharp, chemical tang of fresh latex paint. I walked past the dining room, where the table was already set with the good silver, and headed straight for the stairs. "Maya," my mother's voice called out from the kitchen, high and brittle. "Is that you?" I ignored her. I climbed the stairs, my hand gliding over the polished banister, and walked down the hallway to the room that was legally mine. The door was wide open. They hadn't just measured. They hadn't just planned. They had executed. The walls, formerly a soft, neutral cream, were now a deep, trendy forest green. The carpet had been ripped up, replaced by engineered hardwood that smelled of adhesive. A crib, the expensive one from the catalog, the one that cost more than my first car, sat assembled in the corner, draped in a soft gray blanket. A changing table stood where my desk used to be. My books, my awards, my history, everything was gone. They had finished the room. They were so confident that I would crumble, so certain that their pressure campaign would force me to sign the deed, that they had gone ahead and spent thousands of dollars renovating a property they did not fully own. It was the ultimate act of arrogance. "It looks beautiful, doesn't it?" I turned slowly. Tessa was standing in the doorway. She was wearing a flowing maternity dress, her hands cradling her bump like a shield. She looked flushed, victorious, but there was a flicker of nervousness in her eyes when she took in my suit. "It looks expensive," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "And since I didn't pay for it, and I know Mom and Dad don't have the cash, I assume this was put on a credit card, or perhaps another loan?" Tessa's smile faltered. "We just wanted to be ready. The baby could come any day." "You are 7 months pregnant. Tessa, you have 8 weeks. Stress induces labor," she snapped, moving aside as I walked out of the room. "And you are causing a lot of stress." I walked past her, down the stairs, and into the dining room. Frank and Diane were waiting. My father sat at the head of the table, his posture rigid, looking like a judge presiding over an unruly courtroom. My mother sat to his right, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. "You're here," Frank said, not rising. "Sit down." I placed my briefcase on the floor next to the chair, my usual chair, and sat. I folded my hands on the table. The table was set for lunch, but there was no food, just a thick manila envelope sitting in the center, exactly where the centerpiece should have been. "I made a pot roast," Diane said, her voice trembling. "But I don't think anyone has an appetite. I haven't eaten in 3 days. Maya, I haven't slept. My heart has been racing all night. She looked at me, waiting for the apology, waiting for the dutiful daughter to rush over, hug her, and promise to fix it. I looked at her coolly. You should see a doctor. Mom, insomnia can be a sign of guilt. Diane gasped, clutching her chest. How can you be so cruel? After everything we have done for you, we raised you, we sacrificed for you. And now you are cashing in those chips, I said. Let's skip the emotional preamble. Why am I here? Frank cleared his throat, a deep rumbling sound meant to command silence. He reached out and tapped the manila envelope. We are here to stop this nonsense, he said. That letter from your lawyer was an insult. A courier? Really? Maya, we are a family, not a corporation. You embarrassed us. You embarrassed yourselves when you tried to steal my equity, I replied. Nobody is stealing anything. Frank's face reddened. We are reorganizing, that is all. This house is a family asset. It is meant to serve the family's needs. And right now, the need is Tessa's child. You are single. You are stable. You don't need the security this house provides. Tessa does. So you decided to transfer my ownership to her without my consent? We were going to tell you, Tessa piped up, taking her seat across from me. We just wanted to get the paperwork ready so it would be easy for you. We wanted to be a united front. I want this family to be united. Maya, why can't you just get on board? Frank pushed the envelope across the mahogany table toward me. It slid with a dry hiss. Inside that envelope is a quitclaim deed, Frank said firmly, and a document ratifying the renovations. It transfers your 40% interest to Tessa. In exchange, we will handle your exit from the mortgage. Handle it how? I asked. Refinancing is frozen. We have a private lender lined up, Frank lied. I knew he was lying because I had frozen my credit, and any inquiry would have triggered an alert. But you need to sign this today, right now, before lunch. I looked at the envelope. I didn't touch it. And if I don't? Then you are no longer welcome in this house, Diane said, her voice turning suddenly hard, the martyr mask slipping for a second. And don't expect to see your nephew when he is born. If you turn your back on us, you turn your back on all of us. It was the ultimate threat, excommunication. I leaned forward slightly. I have a question before I consider signing. Frank looked relieved. He thought he had won. He uncapped a fountain pen and held it out to me. Ask. The permit for the renovation upstairs, I said, my voice dropping to a conversational volume. The one filed with the city on September 22nd, the one that allowed you to rip up the floors and paint the walls. What about it? Frank said, his hand remaining steady, though his eyes narrowed. It required the signature of all owners, I said. I didn't sign it. I was in Raleigh. So, my question is simple. Who signed for me? The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Tessa looked down at her lap. Diane froze, the tissue halfway to her nose. Frank lowered the pen slowly to the table. I don't know what you're talking about, Frank said finally. The contractor handled the permits. The contractor handled the paperwork, I corrected. The owners handle the signatures. The digital audit trail shows it was signed from this house, from an IP address registered to Frank Hart. You are imagining things, Diane said, speaking too quickly, her voice shrill. Conspiracies. You have always been paranoid, just like your grandmother. Am I? I asked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't unlock it yet. I just held it in my hand, feeling its weight. I also know about the visit to my apartment, I said. Last Tuesday. I told you, Diane said, looking at Frank for support. I went to check on you. I was worried. You went to check on my filing cabinet, I said. That is a lie. Diane slammed her hand on the table. I tidied up. I moved some papers around because you are a slob. How dare you accuse me of... I tapped the screen. I turned the volume up to the maximum. I placed the phone in the center of the table, right on top of the envelope they wanted me to sign. The video played. The angle was high. From the top of the bookshelf, the image was crystal clear. On screen, Diane walks into the frame. She looks around. She pulls the key from under the plant. She unlocks the cabinet. She pulls out the tax returns. She holds them up. She snaps a photo. She places the tracing paper over the signature. The sound of rustling paper filled the dining room. On screen, Diane shoves the bank statements into her purse. I let it play until the moment she locked the cabinet again. Then I paused it. I looked up. Diane's face was the color of ash. She was trembling so hard her chair vibrated against the floor. Tessa was staring at the phone, her mouth slightly open. Frank was the only one who moved. He reached out and flipped the phone over. Face down. "You spied on your mother," he said. His voice was low, dangerous. It wasn't the voice of a father anymore. It was the voice of a man who realized the corner he was backed into had no exit. "She burglarized my home," I replied. "In the state of North Carolina, stealing financial documents is a felony. Forging a signature on a government document is a felony. Identity theft is a felony." "We are your parents," Frank roared, standing up so abruptly that his chair fell backward with a crash. "We did what we had to do. You were being difficult. You were blocking the future of this family for your own selfish vanity. We needed that signature to save the loan." "Save the loan?" I asked. "Or save yourselves from the debt you hid from me?" Frank leaned over the table, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge. "Listen to me. Maya, you think you are smart? You think this little video makes you powerful? If you try to use this, if you try to expose us, I will paint you as the most unstable, vindictive, mentally ill woman in Charlotte. I will ruin your career. I know people. I know your boss. I will tell them you are having a breakdown. I will make sure no one ever trusts you with a budget again." "And you," Diane hissed, finding her voice again, venom replacing the tears. "You will be alone. No family, no Christmas, no birthdays. You will rot in that apartment of yours." "Just sign the paper, Maya," Tessa pleaded, crying real tears now. "Please, just make it go away. Why do you have to ruin everything?" I looked at them, the three people who were supposed to be my safety net, the people I had spent 32 years trying to please. They looked ugly, not physically, but their souls were exposed, twisted by entitlement and fear. I stood up, I picked up my phone, I picked up my briefcase. I didn't pick up the envelope. "You seem to be confused," I said, my voice calm, steady, and terrifyingly polite. "You think I came here to negotiate. You think I came here to argue about who gets the room or who gets invited to Christmas." I smoothed the front of my jacket. "I didn't come here to argue. Dad, I didn't come here to ask for an apology." I looked Frank dead in the eye. "I came here to clear my name off everything, the deed, the loan, the liability, and the family tree." I turned toward the door. "And just so you know," I added, pausing with my hand on the doorframe, "that video? It's already been uploaded to a secure cloud server, and the handwriting analysis on the permit? It was completed yesterday. I'm not starting the process. Frank, I'm finishing it." I walked out of the dining room, leaving the silence of the grave behind me. I walked out the front door, past the manicured lawn, and got into my car. I didn't look back at the house. The nursery was theirs. But the war? The war was mine. I left my parents' house on Sunday with the illusion that the truth would silence them. I thought that by placing the video of my mother's theft on the dining table, I had checkmated them. I assumed shame would force them into a retreat. I was naive. I forgot the most dangerous rule of narcissists. When the truth corners them, they do not surrender. They rewrite the script. By Monday morning, the narrative had already been twisted into a shape I barely recognized. The first blow came before I had even finished my coffee. My phone lit up with a call from my Aunt Karen. I answered, expecting perhaps a mediating voice. "I cannot believe you," Karen spat before I could even say hello. "I held you when you were a baby. Maya, I changed your diapers. And this is how you repay your family? By threatening to sue your own mother for the house she raised you in? Aunt Karen, that is not what has happened. Don't lie to me, she screamed. Diane called me in tears. She told me everything. She said you are demanding they buy you out for $200,000 immediately or you will kick Tessa out on the street. She said you are trying to bankrupt them because you are jealous of the baby. They forged my signature. Karen, I said, my voice steady. They committed fraud. Oh, stop with the legal mumbo-jumbo, she dismissed. Diane told me you were having some sort of episode, that you are rewriting history in your head. She is worried about your mental state. Maya, we all are. Only a sick person would attack a pregnant woman. I hung up. There was no point in arguing with a flying monkey sent by the Wicked Witch. I opened social media. It was a mistake. Tessa had posted a photo on Instagram. It was a black and white shot of her sitting in the half-finished nursery, looking out the window with a tragic expression. The caption read, "Sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Trying to stay strong for my little one while we fight to keep our home. Family drama, betrayal, heartbroken." The comment section was a firing squad. Cousins I hadn't seen in 10 years. Neighbors from the old block. Even my high school biology teacher. They were all pouring out sympathy for Tessa and venom for the unnamed relative causing this pain. Stay strong. Tess, karma will get her. Some people are just bitter because they are alone. Imagine evicting a baby. Disgusting. My hands shook as I put the phone down. They were isolating me. They were effectively destroying my character within the community, so that if I did take them to court, the jury of public opinion would already be rigged. But the social pressure was just the smoke. The fire was at my office. At 10 o'clock, I was summoned to Linda's office in HR again. This time, the director of finance was sitting there too. Maya, please sit down, Linda said. Her tone was no longer sympathetic. It was cold. We received another email, the finance director said. Cutting to the chase, he slid a piece of paper across the desk. This one was sent to the CEO's direct inbox. I read the text. It was shorter, sharper, and far more dangerous. Subject: Whistleblower complaint regarding Maya Hart. Maya Hart is currently under investigation by her family's bank for attempting to defraud elderly relatives. She is using her position to manipulate financial documents. If she is doing this to her parents, what is she doing to Northline's accounts? They are accusing you of elder abuse and embezzlement, the director said. Maya, we cannot ignore this. We have to place you on administrative leave pending an audit. No, I said firmly. I reached into my bag and pulled out the legal binder Arthur Vance had prepared for me. I slapped it on the desk. This is not a whistleblower complaint, I said, my voice ringing with authority. This is retaliation. I am the victim of a sophisticated identity theft ring involving forged government documents and unauthorized credit inquiries. The perpetrators are my family members. I opened the binder to the page with the affidavit from the forensic handwriting expert. Then I flipped to the letter from Arthur Vance, which clearly stated that we were in the process of filing criminal charges for forgery. I am not under investigation by the bank, I continued. I am the one who froze the assets because they were trying to defraud the bank. If you put me on leave, you are validating their harassment. Here is the contact information for my attorney. He is expecting your call. The finance director read the lawyer's letter. He looked at the forensic report. He looked at me. This is a police matter? He asked, his demeanor shifting from suspicion to shock. It is, I said, and I am handling it. My work performance is impeccable. My accounts are balanced to the penny. Do not let them weaponize this company against me. I walked out of that office still employed, but I knew the ice was thinning. My father knew exactly where to hit me. He knew my career was my pride, and he was trying to burn it down to force me into submission. By Wednesday afternoon, the war shifted fronts again. I received a notification from the city's planning portal. The status of the permit for 124 North Line Street had changed from approved to suspended, pending verification. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was the contractor, Mr. Miller. Ms. Hart? He sounded furious. I have a crew sitting in your driveway, and a city inspector just slapped a stop work order on the door. He says the homeowner claims the permit is fraudulent. I have $5,000 in materials sitting there. I am the homeowner, Mr. Miller, I said, and I did not hire you. The people who hired you forged my name. I suggest you take it up with Frank Hart, and if I were you, I would ask for cash, because his credit is not what he thinks it is. The line went dead. I could only imagine the scene at the house, the halted construction, the confused workers, the humiliated parents. That was when the panic set in. At 6 p.m, my phone buzzed with a text from Diane. The tone was radically different from the screaming woman I had left on Sunday. Maya, honey, please pick up. The contractor is shouting at your father. Tessa is crying again. We can't live like this. I know you are hurt. I know we made mistakes. Can't we just meet for coffee? Just you and me? Mother and daughter? No lawyers? No dad? Just us. I miss my little girl. It was the love bomb, the classic manipulation tactic. When the stick breaks, they offer the carrot. She wanted to separate me from the pack, get me alone, and use guilt to break my resolve. I didn't reply. Then came Frank. He didn't text. He left a voicemail. Maya, look, the city inspector is making a mess. We need to clear this up. I have a friend, a notary public, Jim Davis. He is a good guy. He says if we just meet at his office tomorrow, we can sign a simple affidavit that says there was a misunderstanding. Just one paper. Maya, just to get the contractor back to work. We can discuss the ownership split later. Just help us get the nursery finished. For the baby. Don't be the villain here. Just one paper, just a misunderstanding. He still thought I was stupid. He thought he could trick me into signing a retroactive approval under the guise of clearing things up. I was sitting on my couch, listening to the voicemail, when there was a sharp knock at my door. I froze. I checked the camera feed. It wasn't my parents. It was a uniformed officer from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had something happened? Was there an accident? I opened the door. Officer? Are you Maya Hart? He asked. Yes. He handed me a piece of paper. I am not here to arrest you, ma'am, but I am required to serve you with a copy of this restraining order application and a notice of a complaint filed this afternoon. I took the paper. My hands were trembling. A complaint? Yes, ma'am. A Mr. Frank Hart and Mrs. Diane Hart filed a report alleging theft of property. I laughed, a short, hysterical sound. They filed a report? Against me? They are the ones who forged my signature. The report alleges that on Sunday, October 12th, you entered their residence and removed sensitive financial documents and a family deed from the premises without permission. They claim you are holding these documents for ransom. I stared at the officer. They had done it. They had actually done it. They had taken the crime they committed, Diane stealing my documents, and accused me of doing it to them. They were projecting so hard it was almost impressive. They also allege, the officer continued, checking his notes, that you installed illegal surveillance equipment in their home to spy on them. That is a lie, I said. The video I showed them was from my home, from when my mother broke into my apartment. Well, ma'am, that is for the lawyers to sort out, the officer said, tipping his hat. You have a court date in 3 weeks. Until then, you are advised to stay away from the complainants. He walked away. I stood in the doorway, holding the paper that accused me of being a thief in the house I paid for. The fear vanished. The anxiety about my job vanished. The sadness about my sister vanished. They had crossed the final line. They had brought the police to my door. They had tried to criminalize me to cover their own tracks. I walked back inside and locked the door. The lock they had tried to change, and the lock I had changed back. I picked up my phone and called Arthur Vance. It was 8 o'clock at night. I didn't care. Maya, he answered, is everything okay? No, I said. They just filed a false police report against me. They accused me of stealing the deed. They what? Arthur's voice dropped an octave. They filed a false instrument with law enforcement? Yes. And Arthur? Go on. I am done with the defensive strategy, I said. I want you to release the evidence to the district attorney tomorrow morning. I want to press charges for the forgery, the identity theft, and now, filing a false police report. And I want you to call the bank and inform them of the pending criminal investigation against their borrowers. Maya, that will torch everything, Arthur warned. Your father will lose his business license if he is convicted of fraud. Your mother could face jail time. I looked at the police report in my hand. I looked at the text from my mother calling me her little girl, while she was simultaneously telling the cops I was a thief. They didn't just burn the bridge. Arthur, I said, my voice cold as ice. They tried to throw me into the fire, so let them burn. The police station smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, a scent that I suspected was designed to make everyone uncomfortable. I sat next to Arthur Vance in a small interview room. Across from us sat Detective Miller, the officer assigned to the theft complaint my parents had filed against me. He looked tired. He had likely expected a hysterical daughter begging for mercy. Instead, he got a corporate operations manager with a 3-ring binder and a forensic attorney. We did not wait for him to ask questions. We controlled the narrative from the moment we sat down. Detective, Arthur began, his voice smooth and authoritative. My client has been accused of entering her parents' home on Sunday, October 12th, and stealing a property deed. However, before you proceed with that investigation, we would like to present evidence regarding the document that was allegedly stolen. Arthur slid a single sheet of paper across the metal table. It was the hotel folio from the Marriott in Raleigh. The complainants alleged that my client signed a consent to alter property form in Charlotte on September 22nd. Arthur said, as you can see from this receipt, which includes a time-stamped breakfast charge and an Uber ride to the convention center, Ms. Hart was 140 miles away at that exact time. Detective Miller picked up the paper. He frowned. This is about a renovation permit? It is about a pattern of fraud, I said, speaking for the first time. My parents forged my signature on a city document to begin construction on a house I co-own. When I discovered this and refused to sign a retroactive approval, they filed a false police report accusing me of theft to pressure me into submission. I opened my binder to the next tab. This was the result of the investigation Arthur's team had conducted over the last 48 hours. It was the piece of evidence that turned a family dispute into a criminal conspiracy. We requested the digital audit trail for the permit application from the city's third-party vendor, I explained, pointing to the log. The application was uploaded at 2:15 in the afternoon on September 22nd. The IP address did not come from a residential home. It came from a commercial router. I flipped the page. Specifically, it came from the Copy and Print Center on 4th Street, 3 blocks from my parents' house. We sent an investigator to the shop. They keep transaction logs for their self-service scanning stations. I laid the final piece of the puzzle on the table. It was a copy of a transaction receipt from the print shop, time-stamped at 2:14 in the afternoon on September 22nd. The user scanned a document and paid $2.50 for the service, I said, my voice clinical. The payment was made using a Visa card ending in 4598. I looked at the detective. That is my father's credit card. I have the statement from the joint account to prove it. Detective Miller looked at the receipt, then at the hotel bill, then at me. The narrative my parents had spun, that I was the unstable thief, was disintegrating in real time. He saw the logic. He saw the premeditation. Frank Hart had driven to a print shop to scan a forged document because he probably thought using a public computer would hide his tracks. But he was arrogant enough to pay with his own card. This changes things, Miller said, leaning back in his chair. Filing a false police report is a Class 2 misdemeanor. Forgery is a felony. We know, Arthur said. We are not asking you to arrest them today. Detective, we are asking you to document this evidence and suspend the investigation against my client. We are handling the rest through civil channels, but we needed this on the record. We walked out of the station with a case number and the assurance that the theft charges against me were effectively dead in the water, but I was not done. My next stop was the bank, or rather, a virtual stop. Arthur had sent a preservation letter to the bank holding the mortgage and the home equity line of credit. In response, and likely to cover their own backs, the bank had released a full history of the loan's activity to Arthur as my legal representative. I sat in Arthur's conference room, dissecting the ledger. I found what I was looking for on page 4. The HELOC, the secondary loan that I was liable for, had been dormant for 2 years, but starting in August, there was a flurry of activity. August 15th, withdrawal of $5,000. September 1st, withdrawal of $8,000. September 20th, withdrawal of $4,000. The dates aligned perfectly with the timeline of Tessa's pregnancy announcement and the start of her nesting phase. I looked at the memo lines on the checks my father had written against the credit line: Pottery Barn Kids, Miller Renovations Deposit, Stroller City. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. They had drawn $17,000 of equity out of the house to pay for Tessa's baby gear and the renovation, and because of the way the loan was structured, the dispute acceleration clause I had found earlier, if I forced the sale of the house, or if the family stopped paying, the bank would come after me for this money first. They were literally buying cribs and designer strollers with my credit rating. I was paying for the very nursery that was displacing me. But the smoking gun regarding Tessa came from an unexpected source. Included in the permit application file was a thread of email correspondence between the applicant, my parents pretending to be me, and the contractor. In one of the emails, dated September 25th, the contractor asked about the paint color for the trim. The reply from Maya Hart, house@gmail.com, was simple. See attached. My sister chose Whispering Willow Green. She says it matches the bedding she bought last week. I froze. She says it matches the bedding she bought last week. Tessa had claimed she was innocent. She had cried and said she just wanted a family. She acted as if the renovation was a surprise gift from our parents. But here was the proof. Tessa had bought bedding in September. She had selected the paint color in September. She knew about the permit application. She knew they were pretending to be me to get the work done. She wasn't a bystander. She was the architect. I closed the file. Arthur, I said, send the invitation. Are you sure? Arthur asked. We have enough to bury them in court right now. We don't need to meet. I don't want to just win in court, I said. I want them to admit it. I want to see their faces when they realize the trap has snapped shut. Arthur nodded and dictated the email to his paralegal. 2. Frank and Diane Hart. Re. Settlement discussion and property transfer. Ms. Hart is willing to meet to discuss a resolution regarding 124 North Line Street. Please attend a meeting at the offices of Vance and Associates this Friday at 2 o'clock. Ms. Hart is prepared to sign the necessary documents to finalize the ownership dispute, provided all parties are present, including Tessa Hart. It was a bait so sweet they couldn't resist. Prepared to sign. They would interpret that as surrender. They would think the police report had scared me straight, just as they planned. Friday afternoon arrived with a gray, drizzling sky. I sat at the head of the long mahogany conference table in Arthur's office. I wore a white silk blouse and black trousers. I looked pristine. I felt like a guillotine blade. At 1:55, the elevator doors opened. Frank walked in first, wearing his Sunday suit, looking smug. Diane followed, clutching her purse, wearing a look of benevolent forgiveness. Tessa brought up the rear, waddling slightly, looking wary but hopeful. Maya, Frank said, extending a hand as if nothing had happened. I am glad you came to your senses. We didn't want to involve the police. You know, it broke your mother's heart. Sit down, I said. I did not shake his hand. They sat on the opposite side of the table. Diane immediately placed a folder on the table. I brought the papers. Sweetie, she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that used to fool me. The notary is down the hall? Dad said we could just get this signed and then go out for an early dinner. We can put all this ugliness behind us. I looked at the folder. It was the same quitclaim deed and retroactive consent they had tried to force on me before. They hadn't changed a comma. They truly believed I was there to capitulate. "Before we sign anything," I said, "there is a procedural matter." I pressed a button on the intercom. "Send her in." The side door opened, and a woman entered. She was carrying a stenotype machine on a tripod. She set it up silently at the end of the table. Frank frowned. "Who is this?" "This is Mrs. Gable," Arthur said from his seat beside me. "She is a court reporter. She is here to create a certified transcript of this meeting." "A transcript?" Diane laughed nervously. "Why do we need that? This is just a family meeting." "It is a settlement conference," I corrected her. "And since there have been accusations of theft, forgery, and false police reports, I want to ensure that every word spoken today is recorded under oath." "I don't like this," Frank said, standing up halfway. "We didn't agree to this." "You can leave," I said calmly. "But if you walk out that door, Arthur files the criminal complaint with the district attorney at 5 o'clock today. We have the evidence. We have the print shop receipt. We have the IP address. We have the bank records showing the $17,000 you stole from the line of credit." Frank sank back into his chair. The color drained from his face. He looked at the court reporter, whose fingers were already hovering over the keys. "What do you want, Maya?" Tessa asked, her voice small. "You want an apology? Fine. I'm sorry. Is that enough?" "No," I said. "I want the truth, and I want it on the record." I opened my folder. I took out the email about the paint color. "Tessa," I said, "you claimed you didn't know about the permit forgery. You said Mom and Dad surprised you, but this email says you picked the paint color, Whispering Willow, on September 25th to match your bedding. Did you, or did you not, participate in the selection of materials for a renovation you knew was unauthorized?" Tessa looked at Frank. Frank looked at the table. "Answer her," Arthur said sharply. "You are on the record." Tessa stammered. "I just picked a color. I didn't know they signed your name." "Liar," I said softly. "But let the record show you admitted to selecting the paint." I turned to Frank. "Dad, did you go to the Copy and Print Center on 4th Street on September 22nd and use your Visa card to pay for the scanning of a document?" Frank's jaw worked. He looked at the stenographer, whose keys were clicking rhythmically, capturing his silence. "I was running errands," he grunted. "Did you scan a consent to alter property form with my forged signature on it?" "I was trying to save the house," Frank exploded, slamming his hand on the table. "I did it for the family. You were never going to sign it. You are too selfish." "Let the record show," Arthur said, "that Mr. Hart admits to signing the document without the owner's consent." Diane began to cry. "Maya, stop this! Please! You are destroying us!" "I am not destroying you, Mom," I said. "I am just turning on the lights. You are the ones who scrambled like cockroaches when the switch flipped." I stood up. I picked up the folder Diane had brought, the one with the papers they wanted me to sign. I didn't open it. I dropped it into the shredder bin in the corner of the room. "I am not signing your papers," I said, "and I am not paying your loan." I pulled a new document from my briefcase. It was thick. It was bound in blue legal backing. "This," I said, sliding it toward them, "is a partition agreement. It requires the immediate sale of 124 North Line Street. The proceeds will be used to pay off the mortgage and the HELOC in full. The remaining equity will be split 60-40, as per the deed. I take my 40%. You take your 60. "We can't sell the house," Tessa shrieked. "Where will I live? The baby is coming in 2 months." "That is not my problem," I said. "You have 60% of the equity. Use it to rent an apartment. But this house is over." "And if we refuse to sign?" Frank asked, his voice shaking with hate. "Then I give the full evidence package to the detective who took your false report," I said. "And instead of moving into a new apartment, you and Mom can discuss your parenting strategies in a holding cell for fraud and filing false instruments." The room was silent, save for the hum of the ventilation and the soft click, click, click of the stenographer. "I agree to talk," I said, repeating the promise I had made to myself. But I will speak in front of a court reporter, and what everyone says will decide who is clean and who is dirty." I looked at my mother. Her face was a mask of defeat. "Sign the agreement," I said, "or I make the call." Frank picked up the pen. His hand shook. But this time, it wasn't from rage. It was from fear. He looked at the document that would end his tenure as the king of his castle. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, he didn't see a daughter he could control. He saw a stranger he couldn't afford to fight. He signed. The atmosphere in the conference room was no longer just tense. It was terminal. The air conditioning hummed, a low drone that seemed to amplify the shallow breathing of my mother and the frantic tapping of the court reporter's machine. I had Frank's signature on the preliminary agreement to talk, but that was just the appetizer. Now came the main course. I motioned to Arthur Vance. He stood up, towering over the table, and opened the primary evidence box. He did not speak with the aggression of a prosecutor, but with the terrifying calm of a coroner declaring a time of death. "Mr. and Mrs. Hart," Arthur began, "what we have established so far is a pattern of behavior, but before we discuss the terms of the partition sale, we need to address the criminal liabilities hanging over this table." He laid out the documents one by one, forming a perfect grid on the mahogany surface. "Exhibit A," Arthur said, pointing to the video still of Diane. "Burglary and theft of financial instruments." "Exhibit B," he continued, placing the print shop receipt next to it. "Identity theft and wire fraud, committed by Frank Hart using a credit card to pay for the transmission of a forged document." "Exhibit C," he added, dropping the email thread between the renovation contractor and the fake email address. "Conspiracy to defraud a municipal entity." And then, he placed the final paper down. It was a printout of the anonymous email sent to the CEO of Northline Civic Solutions. "And Exhibit D," Arthur finished, "tortious interference with a business contract and defamation of character. You tried to get your daughter fired to destroy her financial independence, presumably so she would be unable to hire counsel." My parents stared at the grid. The sheer volume of paper was overwhelming. They had thought they were playing a game of family chicken, where the one who loved the other least would win. They had not realized they were building a prison cell around themselves. "Here is the situation," Arthur said, leaning forward. "We are prepared to file a civil lawsuit for damages totaling $300,000, covering the misappropriated equity, legal fees, and punitive damages for the defamation. Concurrently, we are prepared to hand this entire file over to the district attorney, who is already expecting a follow-up to the police report you filed." Diane let out a choked sob. "Jail? You would send us to jail?" "I am not sending you anywhere," I said, my voice cutting through her tears. "You drove yourselves there when you signed my name." "However," Arthur interrupted, "Ms. Hart is offering an alternative, a complete and total severance." He slid a heavy document toward them. The title page read, "Settlement Agreement and Release of Liability." "Option 1, Arthur explained. "You sign this. It admits to the forgery, recants the police report, and agrees to the immediate sale of the house. It also includes a permanent restraining order and a non-disparagement clause. If you ever mention Maya's name to a relative, a church member, or an employer again in a negative light, the suspended lawsuit triggers immediately." "Option 2, Arthur said, checking his watch. "We walk out, the DA gets the file, the bank forecloses on the fraud, and Frank loses his business license." Diane looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. She reached across the table, ignoring the papers, trying to grab my hand. I pulled back. "Maya," she wept, "we are your family. I carried you for 9 months. I nursed you when you had chicken pox. Doesn't that mean anything? You are letting a lawyer destroy the bond between a mother and daughter over money? Over a room?" It was her final weapon, the guilt trip, the invocation of the sacred maternal bond. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had stolen my tax returns and then accused me of being a thief. "You are right, Mom," I said softly. "You did raise me. You taught me right from wrong, and you taught me that actions have consequences. I pointed to the grid of evidence. You can cry all you want. You can talk about love and sacrifice, but sentiment does not wipe fingerprints off evidence. You didn't act like a mother, you acted like a predator, and I am done being the prey. Frank made a noise in his throat, a guttural growl of denial. I never stole from you. I was managing the family assets. The house is mine. I bought it. The credit card receipt says otherwise, Arthur said, tapping the paper where Frank's Visa number was highlighted. You paid $2.50 to scan a forgery. Frank, that is not management. That is a crime. Frank opened his mouth to argue, to bluster, to bully his way out as he always had. Oh my God, just shut up, Dad. The scream came from the end of the table. We all turned. Tessa was standing up, her hands clutching the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Frank and Diane with pure revulsion. He has the receipts, Tessa shouted, pointing at Arthur. He has the emails. You told me it was legal. You told me Maya gave permission verbally and we just needed to handle the paperwork. You lied to me. Tessa, honey, Diane stammered. We were doing it for you. Don't put this on me, Tessa yelled. I am not going to raise my baby visiting you in prison. I just wanted a place to live. I didn't want to be an accomplice to fraud. It was the implosion I had predicted. The rats were turning on each other. Tessa, realizing the ship was going down, was scrambling for the lifeboat, even if it meant stepping on her parents' heads to get there. I am not part of this, Tessa said, turning to me, her voice shaking. Maya, I swear, I picked the paint, yes, but I thought you knew. I thought you were just being difficult about the move-in date. I didn't know they forged the deed. I didn't believe her entirely. She knew enough, but it didn't matter. Her defection was the final nail in Frank's coffin. Then prove it, I said to Tessa. Tell them to sign. Tessa turned to Frank. Sign the paper. Dad, sign it, or I swear to God, I will testify against you myself. I have to protect my child. Frank looked at his favorite daughter, the one he had done all this for, the one he had tried to rob me to support, and he saw the same cold calculation in her eyes that he had instilled in her. He slumped in his chair. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured tire. He looked old. He looked small. Give me the pen, Frank whispered. Arthur handed him a heavy, black fountain pen. Frank didn't read the document. He flipped to the signature page. He signed his name, Frank Hart, with a shaky, defeated scrawl. It wasn't just a signature. It was the abdication of his throne. He slid the paper to Diane. She signed it through her tears, blotting the ink with her weeping, her hand trembling so violently that the pen tore the paper slightly. Then Arthur slid the document to me. I picked up the pen. I didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I signed my name clearly and firmly, Maya Hart. It is done, Arthur said, pulling the document back and stamping it with his notary seal. The partition action is now binding. The house will be listed for sale on Monday. The proceeds will go into an escrow account controlled by my firm to pay off the debts, and effective immediately. Maya Hart is removed from all liability regarding the mortgage and the HELOC. He looked at Frank. The bank has been notified of the separation of liability. Any further debt you incur is yours alone. I stood up. My legs felt light. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for 5 years, the weight of being the sensible one, the safety net, the backup plan, was gone. I picked up my briefcase. I looked at the three of them one last time. Diane was sobbing into her hands. Frank was staring at the wall, catatonic. Tessa was looking at her phone, likely looking for apartment listings, already moving on. You wanted the nursery, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. You destroyed a family to get it, so keep it. Take the crib. Take the paint. Take the forest green walls. I pushed my chair in. You get the nursery, but I get back my life. I turned and walked toward the door. The sound of my heels on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the room. I stepped out into the hallway. The door to the conference room clicked shut behind me. A heavy, final sound. I walked through the lobby of the law firm. I pushed open the glass doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The rain had stopped. The air was cool and clean. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a notification from the HR portal at Northline Civic Solutions. Subject: Investigation closed. Dear Maya, based on the documentation provided by your legal counsel and the retraction of the external complaint, we have closed the internal audit. Your record remains in good standing. We apologize for the stress this has caused. See you on Monday. I stared at the screen. The job was safe. The debt was gone. The house was sold. The leeches were detached. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of a life that finally, truly, belonged to me. I put the phone in my pocket and walked down the street, not looking back, not even once. Thank you so much for listening to my story on the Lila Revenge Stories channel. I hope you enjoyed seeing justice served as much as I enjoyed writing it. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please leave a comment down below and let me know which country or city you are representing. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who need a little victory in their lives. See you in the next one.